On this occasion, this is my third time coming to Ghana. The first time I came to Ghana because I had made the decision that I'd gone to some of the European countries, you know, like you go on holiday, you go to Spain, you go to France, you go to wherever. And I thought, do you know what? I've actually not been to one of my African countries. And then this time I've come because I wanted to bring my mum, because it's her first time. And I wanted her to have an experience of Africa before her eyes close. So when we went to Cape Coast, we were told by the guide that, no, they have the male dungeons which house or had about 1,000 of our men. And above the dungeons, they built a church. So they built this church for the propagation of the gospel. It was called the Society of the Propagation of the Gospel. So now they had like a hole where they can look down and still see, they'll be in church, whatever they're doing up there, and look down and still see what the Africans that they have chained are doing. I mean, if you're going to a church, yeah, and there's thousands of you in this church, and there's this pastor or preacher or whatever he wants to be called, and he is just telling you something that ultimately is going to lead you to exchange, to give money for your salvation. That's where it's going to lead. You have to at some point realize that this does not make sense. You have to start to own your spiritual intelligence, because it is a faculty that exists. I am Michelle Ya Asantwa, and I am traveling from London to Ghana via Guyana. Guyana was mixed because you were aware that you weren't with your parents, because my father also migrated, so I didn't know him. And so I was living with my auntie and my cousins, and that was a really interesting and sort of difficult time. But there was a certain level of freedom, I suppose, in terms of being a child, running, you know, fetching water even. We used to have to fetch water. We used to, like how it rained here today. I was so excited when I saw the rain, because if we were in Guyana as children, we would be happy to see the rain because you'd bathe in the rain. Things were simple. We didn't have plenty, but we had a certain measure of freedom. If a fruit tree was over there and overbearing, you could go and pick the fruits and no problem. So the first thing I suppose I realized, the first difference when I came to the UK, was you couldn't do that. That was off territory. You couldn't just go and pick somebody's fruit because it was just hanging nearby, because that was when the policing, the sanctioning, the no. They also have a sign. They have a sign that says no ball games. And I remember finding that really curious, meaning that, you know, you can do certain things, but you can't play ball here. So as a child, it was always, when I came to the UK, it was things that there was a stop sign. There were things you can't do, even though we had lots of play areas. So maybe that's why they're like, well, you can play over there. We have a park for you, but you can't play here. On this occasion, this is my third time coming to Ghana. The first time I came to Ghana because I had made the decision that I'd gone to some of the European countries, you know, like you go on holiday, you go to Spain, you go to France, you go to wherever. And I thought, do you know what? I've actually not been to one of my African countries. The next time I have holiday, that's what I'm going to do. So that's the first time when I came. That was 20 years ago. And then I came back again 10 years. When I came here the first time, it was very momentous. I felt home, yeah. When I came back was 10 years, was 2013 for a conference, a writing conference. And then this time I've come because I wanted to bring my mum, because it's her first time. And I wanted her to have an experience of Africa before her eyes close. It wasn't so much like she's sitting there saying, asking me to take her to the continent. It was me that thought, nah, Mum, because my mum dreams a lot, but a lot of the times, like, she'll dream and she'll say to me in the morning, oh, I went to Guyana every night. Every night she'll dream, I went to Guyana. To her, it's new, like she's going to Guyana, it's a new experience. But to me, it's like, but Mum, you do that every night. And that's because you haven't been anywhere else to dream in Africa. You know what I mean? To dream the continent or to dream whatever. Even though, although when we came the first time, she kept saying, oh, I've been here before. And I've been here. And I said, no, Mum, this is the first time. She said, no, I know I've been here before. Anyway, and so I wanted my mum to have that physical perspective of the continent, at least this part, so that when she goes over into the spiritual realm, she will know a different perspective, even though I know she will know. But I want it to be a physical resonance and to do something that her ancestors could also record. The first visit, for example, when I went to Cape Coast, that was, it was moving and it will always be moving. But this time they had imposed a touristic element into it, which was just like shocking. Like they have people selling stuff inside of that dungeon area where the soldiers would have been guarding us and whatever. I found that really disturbing. I thought, if they're going to do something like that, maybe put it outside. So when you enter, as somebody who's coming from the diaspora, and the first thing that, you got people hustling you for a start before you get into the thing. Didn't have that 20 years ago. And maybe they tried to, they might have asked you to pay something, but it wasn't so in your face that they were asking you to pay. And if you said, well, I'm Ghanaian, they would give you a bly. They would say, oh, okay, or what? Yeah, I mean, I do various things. I have different hats. One of them is I teach independently. I'm not part of an institution, so I therefore get to design what curricula I feel might be beneficial. I do some writing workshops. I do consultancy works around literature, literacy. I do publishing, I do editing, but I also do work around indigenous or traditional African spirituality. That's really important to me, and that was one of my research at university. At some point during my studies at university, I underwent an experience that led me to rethink my entire existence and being. And because I wanted to understand what the experience was, and, you know, from my perspective, it was a spiritual experience, but I needed to understand that. And so therefore, I decided that I would change my course of study in a particular way and study spirituality, but from Guyanese perspective. Well, it was that ultimately that we are quite connected. In the diaspora, we're connected to the continent, but we are disconnected in our realization of it, if you see what I mean. We are not, there's a lack of awareness. And so you could find the links if you're prepared to do the study, yeah? But if you don't take time to do the study, then you can continue in that wilderness of difference rather than a community, you know, a coming together, a connection. So for example, my one that I did is called Comfort, and it comes from Akom. It comes from Akomfo, so it comes from the traditional priests in Ghana, but people aren't aware of that connection whether it's so therefore in Ghana they're not aware that there's this link, there's this word that connects us to people in Guyana, and in Guyana they're not aware that that word that we use, because of that energy that comes through, has a basis in Ghana. So that's one of the things that I found. Yeah, it's the disconnection is to do with ultimately the fact that, as I said, we have that practice. I'm using the example of Guyana and Comfort. The format of that is when you hear drums, you're doing a ritual or whatever, and you play the drums, because most of our things, from a traditional angle, we use the drum as the vehicle to drive that, which is in itself an African thing. Of course, most of them know that that's where we have that from. That's part of our ancestral ritual and tradition. But specifically, knowing that comfort, going into trance, catching spirit, can direct you, the person who's doing it, to know themselves. Yeah, that they don't know. So because there's not necessarily a format to bring that out in them, because we have lost that link to say, okay, now that we see that you can go into this trance and you can, you catch comfort, there's something that we need to now know. We need to sit you down and try and work out your line, work out what you're supposed to do, your purpose. A formal way of doing that is not, or a more connected way of doing that has not been, is not really taken on board so much. We might dance the comfort, and it seems like we're having a merriment. It seems like we are in a state of ecstasy. But that bit where, okay, now what are you going to do with this? Why is that coming to you specifically, and not there's like, let's say there's 20 people here, but the spirit is coming on to you. What does that mean for you? How does this direct you to your self-knowledge and self-awareness, and therefore also your ancestors? And how are you serving your people, yourself, your ancestors, your God? How are you doing this? So that, whereas here, I know that you that root, that connection, you would be able to trace. Once you see that, you say, okay, this one, we'll take them there, and have that serious understanding and awareness. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we know that Christianity has its various forms, and we know that there are old forms that were before. Whatever we called it, we might not have called it Christianity. I haven't gone too deeply into it to know what we called that version before it then became the version that we now know. So we know that there's an old expression of Christianity that comes out of Africa. That's not debatable. But then once we had contact with the Europeans on a grand scale, they knew that how important our connection with nature, our connection with land, our connection with our ancestors, and our varied connections with forces that are not just the divine per se, as in how we call God, but there are other forces that we utilized, what they came along and called fetish, or whatever name they decided to give it. But we use these, and we have invested a lot of our self-evolution in these energies and these entities. So when they came, that contact that we had with them, naturally, they have a system of buck breaking, if you want to call it that. They know how to break spirit, or their impetus was to break your spirit. Because if a person's spirit is broken, yeah, they have nothing to cling to. They have nothing that's really grounding them there. We are here, there, and everywhere. We are not grounded, because the traditionals, because of its connection with nature and its connection with cosmology and everything, is grounding and it's elevating. It will ground you and it will lift you. It will make you see. So the effect of that contact with them was to ultimately break the spirit. Of course, we know that that's impossible. Yeah, we know that to break someone's spirit, if their will is strong enough and they, it's like you might turn me one way, but I have a force that is in me that can turn me the other way or turn me round again. So it's how much we give in to their reality in the long term will determine how we rise. So yeah, it was about breaking our spirit. I'll give you a tangible example. So when we went to Cape Coast, we were told by the guide that they have the dungeons. So they have the male dungeons, and beneath the they have the male dungeons which house or had about 1,000 of our men, and above the dungeons they built a church. So they built this church for the propagation of the gospel. It was called the Society of the Propagation of the Gospel. So now they had like a hole where they can look down and still see. They'll be in church, whatever they're doing up there, and look down and still see what the Africans that they have chained were doing. And so when I asked the guide why he thought that they had built the church on the top of the dungeon, that was his answer. It was because the energy, yeah, of all those Africans that they have now got captive is you're suppressing it because you're standing on it, yeah, with your what you consider to be your energy. And there's only a few of you. There's only a few of you in this church, and you are praying to your God, your whatever. And we have got no access to do that because our spirit is just contained. We are having to think of something else other than we'll be calling on our God. We'll be calling on Nyame. We will, but at the same time, the physical containment, yeah, is determining that ultimate outcome because we're confined. You see, so it's about breaking how deeply they're prepared to go to break our spirit, and this is the legacy that we have. Yes, well, we have to be prepared to access the messages that are coming in the different forms that they're coming to us, because for me, we are intelligent. We have our mind, yes, and we have to be able to listen to that mind. I mean, if you're going to a church, yeah, and there's thousands of you in this church, and there's this pastor or preacher or whatever he wants to be called, and he is just telling you something that ultimately is going to lead you to exchange, to give money for your salvation. That's where it's going to lead. You have to at some point realize that this does not make sense. You have to start to own your spiritual intelligence because it is a faculty that exists. None of us is more special than the other for having identified that, hold on a minute, this is not right. We know about enslavement. We know it. So we have to stop being so cheap, cheapening our lives, cheapening our worth. And so for some of us who are trying to raise the consciousness, we're going to have to work tirelessly, but we cannot really do that alone. We have to educate those of us who are deliberately acting in ignorance to be schooled to recognize that what you're doing is not only damaging to you in this here and now, but is damaging to your generations into the future. That's a problem. But it is a spiritual intelligence that we have to be able to acknowledge. And a lot of the times what we do is we are observing what others are telling us. if our neighbor is going to church, we got to go to church. It's just like wearing a weave or wearing a whatever. That's a fashion because that's what tells me is our identity. No, there's no way that we can, there's no formula. You can't say, okay, if you do this, you do that, you'll go back to African spirituality. You have to start for yourself to read into what is clearly and obviously in front of you. And clearly and obviously in front of you is that this thing is a fad, and there's more to life than what I'm seeing. I don't really know how else, like a lot of people will ask me these questions, but I don't know how else, to tell them to do it. I see it as a spell, and spells only have a certain lifespan. All spells have a certain lifespan, yeah? But the soul, you have your individual soul, and you have the community soul, you have the universe's soul. It knows and it sees what has gone on. And to reconcile without going crazy and without getting angry and without doing all of that and without hating and living in say like the country where you're seeing the racism all the time, or even coming over here and seeing the effects of that colonization, you have to know that it's not a forever and done thing. This is not a done thing. It's not over. By that I mean that it's not sealed. Like, this is it, they did this, they're getting away with it, and we're going to just, that's it. No, you have to reconcile yourself that I'm going to spend the rest of my life tirelessly unlearning, yes, and relearning what it is that I know has been deleterious to my existence, so that I can school others, I can keep schooling myself into eternity. We have to think about eternity. We have to think that when I die, that's not the end of me, because that's how it has always been for us. It's not, and that's what they hope. They hope, like when we went through that door of no return, or whatever euphemism they call that place, yeah, that we wouldn't return, but we have returned. There's my 91-year-old mother there, yeah, who showed them we've come back, yeah, and if we can come back, because my mum is an ancestor. I'm an ancestor, yeah? So we have to think forward and prepare. That's your reconciliation. That's how you're going to be able to live with the nightmare that it is knowing that it's not done. It's not a done deal. And my task here, when I came back, I knew what I was coming back to do. You have to own that awareness of knowing what it is you came back here to do, because that's why you're asking the questions. That's why you're being probed. And you have to keep asking the questions, continue to ask the questions. Don't stop asking the questions, because the questions are coming from your higher self, from your God, that's making you more and more empowered, more and more sovereign, more and more determined, more and more aware, more and more sure. And the more you ask the question, the more determined you become, the more assured you become. And so fast forward into your futures, your eternities, you will be in that zone where these people that seem to have the victory, they won't. It won't be like that. So that's the reconciliation. You will avenge in that more spiritual way that the misfortune of our ancestors. It will happen.
You mentioned that you went to an African traditional church.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about that and maybe how different it is from church as we know it.
Oh yeah, that's great. So we went on Sunday. A brother called Nana Sankofa, who is he's a spiritualist, he's a Mamiwata priest. He suggested that we go to this church on Sunday, which they have it at the cafe, the Aboja Cafe by the Arts Centre, and he thought my mum would appreciate it, and I would too. And it was just like where we are here, just outside. We were under a big tree, and under the big tree we then opened up with a libation. we had some drummers, and we had I suppose he's a traditional priest. So you have the traditional priest who will give the service based not on a prescribed set of what he's already imagined, what he's going to tell the congregation. It was mostly like, yeah, I'll wait for the message to come, the message that the people who have come need to know, and I will tell them the message. And interspersing with that, there will be the drummers, which were really brilliant. You have the drumming, and then you have a sister that was dancing, and sometimes the priest would come up and dance, and then they invite, after we've done libation, obviously, and then he'd invite us to say who we are, and then they sing to us, they welcome us in, and it's beautiful, you know. You felt at home. Now, the churches that I've gone to in my life, I mean, there are different experiences in different churches, okay? But there you go, you have the Bible, this is the hymn that you sing, and you sing the hymn. Some of the churches drag the hymn out till like they're just trying to raise Lazarus or whatever. And some of them, yeah, they're joyful. Well, I always prefer the joyful ones rather than the Pentecostals. So you have that, and you know, you have the ecstatic leader who is supposed to get you riled up and what have you. But for me, nothing ultimately beats those drums. You know, the drums make it. And what was different, of course, is that there were very few of us in that traditional. If we switched and gone later on to a Christian one, it would be packed, like packed. So that was the difference. Yeah, that was the difference. And the elders are keeping it going. And I love the fact that's why I love working with some elders, some old people, because they keep us grounded. And if more of us, especially the young ones, because think of the energy of young people, you know, if we were coming together under that system, we'd be strong as a people, strong as a nation.
That's shocking that you just said that if it was a Christian church, it would be packed. What happened to us? Like, why are we very desperate to abandon who we are in pursuit of what we are told we should be?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. It's because, like I said, that part of that spellboundness means that it's plainly before you, but you're in that state of the spell is there, and the spell has to be ignited to work itself off, because it just keeps proliferating and perpetuating itself, because we also like to be in crowds. We also feel that there's something that they're getting, because look, 100 people have gone over there. That church might have started off with a similar 10 or 15 people. The 10 or the 15 people might be real people. They might be fake people that, you know, they want to set up a church. We get some people to come along and make it look good and what have you, and then go and say to others, oh yeah, there's this church. Oh, I testify that this happened to me. I built my house on the fact that, you know, I did and what have you. So most of us are going for that salvation, because we're going to get the salvation from the Father in the sky or whatever. And we've latched onto that because that was what was beaten into us. And that's a fact. It was beaten into us. There's no two ways about it. It was beaten into us, and then we were inculcated. That was our education system. There was the church. There was a school. They were linked, and what you learnt. So now here, you can't turn anywhere without there being a church, or even if there's not a physical church, there's the buses that will give you some scripture, or some car that's going to give you some scripture, or some boomerang that's going to give you. So your mind is constantly being inculcated all the time. So you don't have enough time to breathe. You need space to really think, and for those questions that you're talking about to ask to come. You need that time. That's why we talk about meditation and being still. But those churches don't give you no time to meditate. Yeah. It's just boom, boom, boom. And then they also have a book that they tell you. Now, people like that because they also like to give over responsibility. In the traditional system, Your responsibility is to your ancestors and to your spiritual evolution, yes? And to work with your divine, on your divinities, to work with them. But in the Christian say, or the other systems, it's to something else is going to take care of that, like absolutely, you know, and you pay that something else. You pay your way into heaven. Yeah.
From what you've just said, do you see that the way Africans practice, particularly the white man religion, we've taken it to far more extremes than even the white people do. It's I don't know if it's our interpretation or our need to overcompensate for something, but we're in church 24/7. We are not using common sense anymore. If you're sick, instead of seeking medical help, you're waiting for a big miracle. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but there's nature and there's science and there are all these things that common sense should dictate that they should help you. Like you said, we are worshiping because we need something. Poverty is the disease. And somebody was saying, when many young Africans particularly leave the continent and go to UK or US and things become better for them, they stop going to church.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. I've observed that myself. Because it is a facilitation. So Christianity or religion is facilitating some material aspiration. You know, the spiritual aspiration is supposed to be there because obviously the aspiration is to believe in the heaven. But it will happen like that because it's fake. You know, their approach to it, their involvement with it is fake. They're there because they've seen what the masses have amassed. The mass are going to there, so we go there. And that's why I always marvel at the way Christians walk down the road with their Bible in their hand. That's just a show thing. Like, look, can you see me, God, neighbor, work colleague? Look, I've just come from church. Here is my Bible in my hand to prove it. And they walk down. It's like a badge. You don't need to do all of that if that's like a genuine thing that you know, it's real to you. But when it's like this facility to prove something, that's when you do all these there's all these additionals. So you're right, they do overdo it because a white person's not walking down the road with the Bible showing out like that. In fact, some of them might not even have a Bible. They just wait till they get into the church. And then they're given the Bible and they read their Bible there. They do, it's very orderly, and they, you know, sing their thing, and then they go off, and that's it. They're not. Some churches that I've gone to after the service have done, they go at the back and have their little cigarette and their little drink and their little whatever. But we have taken it to a different level. But I think part of us taking it to a different level is because we are naturally spiritual people. We are naturally people who want to. It's just because we've gone so far over, but our spirit, our soul is still calling us to something. It's still asking us to reverence. It's still asking us to worship, to revere, to honor and stuff like that. But because we're not doing it, we're doing it in this sort of false way, we overdoing it because you need to look here, but you're looking over there, so you keep going and you're going and going because it's like a blind person. You're trying to tell the blind person, no, it's this way. But the blind person doesn't actually know when you say this way, which way is that this way? So they keep going left. And you're saying, but it come this way. They say, I don't know which this way is. So they've off track is what I'm saying. They're off track, you know. My purpose, well, to reconcile to reconcile this as home, to return, to not be exiled, consciously and deliberately in exile. If I have to come and sleep on a piece of grass, yeah, I'd rather do that than be consciously in exile. I don't have to be in exile in the outside of here, you know. And as my namesake Nana Ya Santua, it always hurt me that she was exiled. and died in exile and then had to be returned back home here. So I always think to myself, well, if I can consciously make it happen so that I can be returned home, then that's what I want to do. So it's to return and to encourage others to, if they want to come and make a pilgrimage here, that's what they do. But ultimately, return.